This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 820, recorded on Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. Is it time yet? Hey there, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your heads with fish, psilocybin, and screams. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. All of the content from all of the platforms in which content is contained on whatever new device that streams it into our consciousness cannot compete to the simple beauty of having your favorite beverage outside under the bright blue sky of a sunny Southern California springtime day. Or in a crowded cafe bookstore in cloudy, sweaty weather Portland. Or a bustling New York deli where everyone is bagels to briskets, wanting what she's having. Or even mingling with the masses in the fragrant fish markets of foggy San Francisco as the world begins to emerge, albeit too soon, from a half-masked attempt to divert a pandemic. In those simple things that we've been missing, once taken for granted, we will relish with tremendous glee once everything begins to get back to actual normal. Going out in public, places not inside our own homes, will be amazing. But before we go full-on post-pandemic COVID complacency, let us keep in mind that while we're almost there, we ain't there yet. Sit back, stay home, tune in to the electronic void just a little bit longer with This Week in Science coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, everybody.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us once again, or maybe for the first time. We are so glad that you are here, and we hope that you enjoy this adventure in science. Whoa! All right, back again. We have a whole week's worth of science to talk about. I have stories about super sneaky light sneaking its way through things. I have a FermiLab follow-up from that story from last week, an official COVID update, and a change to some science textbooks. What do you have, Justin?
I've got Space Dummies, a magic mushroom that makes you happy, Imprinting Autism, and why 2020 doesn't count.
It doesn't?
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't
Good.
count.
Nobody thinks it
It
counts.
does not count.
No.
It doesn't. Okay, I want to hear the science behind that, though. Blair, what is in the animal corner?
So believe it or not, in the animal corner, I have screaming, I have speed bumps, I have yawning, and I have blood. So
It's all over the place. It's like, speed bump. Don't get in an accident because you're yawning. Uh-oh, blood. Okay, I am
sure,
very
yeah, you
thrilled
can do that.
for the story that my mind is spinning up for all your animal stories.
yes, they are in fact animal stories.
All right, everyone. As we jump into the show, I want to remind you that if you have not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can do that. You can find us all places that podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitch. On Twitch, we are TWIS Science. Oh, yeah, we're over on Instagram, too, as TWIS Science. But our website is twis.org, and that's where you can find out links and show notes related to every episode that we produce. All right. This weekend, I have an announcement. Well, if you've been listening, you know this announcement, but just so you know, this weekend is it. April 17th, 4 p.m. Pacific time. DTNS TWIS crossover! That's right.
Yeah.
Teaming up with the DTNS team on Saturday afternoon here in the Pacific region, but it could be evening for you or morning, wherever you are. And we're going to have some science tech fun. Going to be like dipping chocolate in peanut butter. It's going to be great.
We've been taking suggestions from Twitter and in emails. Very exciting.
Very exciting. Don't miss it. We will be broadcasting to all of our usual platforms. You'll be able to watch the show on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitch. Okay, here comes the science.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna like super physics science you just out of the gate for the show. Okay, you ready? You ready for some super physics science? Last week I opened the show talking about the muon G-2 or G2 experiment that took place at Brookhaven National Laboratory and FermiLab, and they've been working on determining this magnetic moment calculation for muons. And last week there was an experimental result that really deviated from what would be predicted by the standard model. And so researchers are like, ooh, does this mean new physics? Well, I didn't realize it, but on the very same day, or no, actually, I think it was like the next morning. It was like after, just right when this stuff was going on, there was a whole new publication in Nature by another group of physicists, theorists, not experimentalists, and they did a really big supercomputer computation to figure out the same value that the muon G2 experiment had just found through experimentation. So these theorists, they're like, no, our supercomputers are way better. And so this value is great. And their value is really, really close. The value they figured out is kind of like it agrees more with the standard model. And so that makes it so everybody's like, oh, what is going on? Which is right? Which is wrong? And now it's the battle of the theorists and the experimentalists, and everybody's going to be waiting for more data to be crunched for the experiment, and everybody's going to be waiting for more supercomputer theoretical experiments to be run to see which way the dice are loaded. Because there's no answer yet. This is science, and it's very exciting that both of these results came out opposite from each other, basically on the same day. And it's experimentalists versus theorists. So this, to me, is like the epitome of physics research.
But wait a second. So wait, maybe I'm missing something. One of them was an actual experiment.
Yes.
One of them
was a simulation.
Bunch of nerds on a computer.
Yeah.
I mean, granted they both are. But one was just the computer.
It was. One was just the computer.
And that one is then the one between those two that I would trust the least.
That's what you would think. So researchers working on these supercomputer, what they're called lattice calculations that are based on this idea of quantum chromodynamics and the theory of quarks and the strong nuclear force, and basically taking information and brute force calculating using supercomputers where they have a lattice. And as the article that I will link to in our show notes will say, the model they use consists of space and time as a lattice of discrete points occupied by quarks and particles called gluons, which convey the strong force. And so this technique can calculate the masses of protons and neutrons, but they haven't tried it before with muons. And so there's too many uncertainties, but this group did it, and they're very certain. They are very certain about their result.
Yeah, but the thing is that any model is only as good as you have built it to see things and know things. You have some point you're putting in value. Some point you're not.
Yeah.
Computers aren't just going out and observing the world and then coming back to us as like, well, here's what I've learned. let me report back, boss. So I went out there and I did some of those experiments out there and did some observations. No, they're only working with the data that they've gotten, which is why you'll only get some conflict if you let's make it up something, right? We're trying to identify a raccoon with a supercomputer, but all the information that we put in is dogs and cats. We have absolutely covered dogs and cats. And what is the thing going to say? Some sort of combination of dog and cat is what a raccoon is. It's maybe a hybrid. Maybe, we give it some accessory information about hybridization, and it might even predict that it cannot reproduce because it's a hybrid, and especially when it's of an odd species, which is very rare. So, but it's not, doesn't mean anything. I trust the experiment still.
So I think I see both things here, but ultimately theoretical physics is still theoretical until it's observable, right? And then once it's observable, it needs to be replicable.
Yes.
So these are kind of so first of all, they observe something. They think they observe something. It wasn't replicable in a computer model. So that's kind of a problem. So now is it replicable in anything moving forward, right? But then on top of that, yes, computer models are just models. So I see it fighting from both sides, kind of.
Yep. So basically, more work needs to be done. That is where we are. They need to replicate the experiment, or at the very least, really dig into the data that they have to see if their result is robust and stands up. But yes, there need to be more experiments, more simulations, more brute force calculations, more fist fights between theorists and experimentalists. Mm-hmm. No, I'm kidding about that last part. That's not true. But yes, more data. That's the only way that a true consensus will eventually be reached. But for anyone to say, this one experiment is the real answer, this one calculation is the real one, at this point is very premature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would have a very different opinion if there was another experiment that was run that came out with a different answer. Then I'd be like, ooh, now we have a battle of experimentation.
Exactly.
And what are your parameters? And how was it conducted? And how was this recorded? And how did you crunch numbers to figure out what was in that data? And how did you do that? And all that becomes on board. But one that just didn't have a experimental basis on it, I would have a hard time believing that one. Oh, yeah.
Well, but it's tough because experiments have potential for human error. So I feel like this is where I see, in order to know what's really going on, both should agree. The thing that takes human error out of the equation and the thing that isn't happening in the real world. There should be consensus for me to really think something is happening.
Yep. And that the theorists and the experimentalists really know what's going on. That they've got a theory. Really. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Yes.
From physics to space, Justin.
Oh, is it the space story time? Okay, so this is Blue Origin. Almost launched people into space today.
Almost.
Almost.
So close.
Yeah, they didn't make it, unfortunately.
Wait, what happened to the people?
The astronauts...
Something bad?
No, they're fine. They're fine. Everybody's fine.
Good. All right.
Astronauts tested seatbelts. They checked out the radio links. They went over the in-flight safety video. They placed their phones in rocket mode, and they thumbed through the in-flight menu to see what food was going to be being served on the trip, before then exiting the craft right before it launched. Why would they do that? They were that close. The New Shepard rocket launch went on a 10.5-minute trip and landed again. This is quoting voice from Ariane Cornell. While there are no astronauts on board today, that was a critical step toward our march toward first human flight.
Yeah, you got to test the seatbelts.
I was going to say the flight commentator might have missed the fact that human flight is a thing that we've achieved
many times. Yes, but not on the New Shepard mission.
It's the first time you've been successful at it at some point, but not first. It's, anyway. Company is very close to putting passengers in the air. Blue Origin's goal is to take paying customers on short orbital excursions, letting them experience the bliss of being 3 times their body weight for 2.5 minutes on launch, then weightless for 3 minutes, then falling back to Earth and landing very gently in the world's largest collection of cardboard boxes. This was the 15th flight of a New Shepard rocket, which is named after the first American in space, Alan Shepard. Capsule reached an altitude of 66 miles, which is just above the official border to space, which if you think about a place that's 66 miles from where you're sitting right now, you're looking at an hour's drive. Doesn't really seem that far. That seems pretty easy. But when you're going up.
Straight up, yeah, for an hour.
Takes a lot of energy. And they don't go straight up. They kind of go a bit in an angle. Straight up.
Little arc. Yeah.
Yeah.
But congratulations on, the flight was successful, right? We've got, aside from the employees, not astronauts, but test astronauts, pretend astronauts, testing everything out ahead of time and then getting out, and then it did its thing, right? Everything's good.
Well, yeah, it went up. There. It went up. The reusable booster rocket landed upright, so that means they get to use it again. It landed upright 7 minutes after the liftoff. Capsule touched down under parachute about 3 minutes after the rocket booster had landed. There was someone on board, though. It was a spacesuited mannequin named Skywalker. There was one dummy on board. One of the things they point out is that it has the windows make up 1/3 of the capsule.
Yeah.
It's only like a 6-person seater thing.
I've been inside the capsule before, and it's beautiful.
Way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's a lot of space. The windows make up most of it, so anyone lucky enough to be able to take one of these flights once they really start taking space tourists up, they're going to have a great view and a really great ride.
Because what's the point of going to space if you can't look out a window and go, "Hey, look, I'm in space."
So something just occurred to me that I don't know why I hadn't really thought about it, but were you joking, or do they really have a menu? No, they don't. Okay, because it's short. But like in the future, right? I assume there will be longer excursions. And I just kind of had this thought about being a space flight attendant.
Eventually.
What a wild job that's going to be in the future.
Eventually. You're all astronaut / flight attendant. You people do double duty. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. You have an astronaut serving drinks? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think that gonna, because it feels like it will be too much to put somebody through to have them launched that many times.
Oh, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it's a 10-minute flight, but that's like 3 G's.
Yeah,
like
unless it's just part of your rotation as a Delta flight attendant. To do, 3 or 4. Anyway,
but while you're coming down,
just the passengers.
While you're coming down, you might be prone to screaming a bit.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. So,
but why you might be screaming? Yeah, that's the question. Are you screaming because
I know it's a transition, and I know I'm screwing it up, but I do really like the fact that you were more pointing out the fact that there can't really be an in-flight menu versus the capsule landing in a giant stack of cardboard boxes. Because that's the one, because it's the owner of Amazon's company. Oh, that's what happens to all the cardboard.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
So, screaming. You might be screaming on your way down from excitement, elation, terror. I don't know, any number of things, right? So screaming for humans can mean a lot of things. Sometimes I scream when I see someone I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm really excited to see them, even though that might make me a little bit basic. But anyway, University of Zurich wanted to look at human screams and what those signals mean. They found that human screams signal more than just fear, as I was saying, and are more acoustically diverse than other animals. So they looked at scream-like calls in a lot of animals, but they always seem to have a negative context, a social conflict, the presence of predators, environmental threats. But humans also scream when they're sad, when they're experiencing despair, and when they're experiencing elation, when they're crazy happy, right? And so they see this as unique amongst humans. They looked at 12 participants. They were asked to vocalize positive and negative screams. And they kind of described a situation before they did it. And then a different group of individuals rated the emotional nature of the scream. So they classified the scream into different categories and then underwent functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, while listening to those screams. They revealed 6 psychoacoustically distinct types of screams: pain, anger, fear, pleasure, sadness, and joy. So only really one or two of those are part of what we were talking about in the animal kingdom, maybe pain and fear. So these are new to the animal kingdom as far as we can tell. We don't know, all the time we're finding out animals are making sounds we didn't hear, that things mean what we didn't think they meant. So this is definitely, we'll put a pin in this for later, but it sounds like this is pretty unique. And listeners responded more quickly and accurately and with higher neural sensitivity to non-alarm and positive scream calls than to the alarming screams. So they had more frontal lobe reaction and quicker reactions to these things that seem unique to humans. And so they're also more diverse in their signaling and communicative in humans than we had assumed. So this seems to be a diversified communication technique in humans and represents a major evolutionary step. Again, I would not be surprised if we find out other animals are doing this, but just right now, it looks like this is what's happening. And that might be because we have developed language, but in terms of guttural sounds, our vocal cords are not that good. And that's kind of what I was thinking about when I read this article is that's because we can only make one sound and it's a scream. Maybe we can whistle if we teach ourselves. We can laugh, but what other sounds can the human vocal cords make besides speech and screaming?
Grunts.
Sure.
But yeah. I'm thinking about the potential multiple meanings of screams and how we perceive them and wondering how, we listen to something, say, a call versus a song in a bird. And so from our listener standpoint, it's like, this bird has one call. And we say, that's their alarm call. And then we say, they have this song for these other. What if that call actually has differences that we haven't noticed yet that the birds pay attention to? Mm-hmm. Similar to how this is turning out.
Yeah. Very possible.
First thing I thought of is dog barking.
Yeah.
Like dogs bark at all of those things. And they might have different barks for them.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's exactly what I was trying to say too about how we just make kind of one sound is that, dogs bark, they howl, they whine, they whimper. They make all sorts of different sounds that feel very distinct. So maybe it is just that our vocal range is a lot more narrow. Anyway.
Do either of you scream at all those things? Like, I don't scream at any of them. I don't think I scream at all. I don't have that setting.
I mean, I yelp occasionally. I think I have screamed on occasion, sometimes like Blair in happiness when I see people and very excited. Maybe at a concert, expressing excitement.
That's a good one.
Is it a scream or is it a woo, like a woot? That can't be a scream. That's not the same.
I think it's a scream.
Ah, look, is it?
I've done the whoops and I've also done the screams.
Mm-hmm.
Get it
Like,
all
I feel
out
like
there.
I've done fake screams, like emulating people screaming. Like, ah, look who's here. But it's totally made up. It's not an
But
actual
that's the
me.
thing. Is it a made up scream?
Mine is
High
just
pitched
simulated.
scream. Is it made up and happy? Or is it authentic and fearful?
Yeah, it's
right?
still being used as communication by you.
Regardless.
Yeah.
Is the point. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter if you consider it fake. If it's a sound that you're making to communicate a thing, it is still categorized as a sound that you are making to communicate a thing, which in this case would be a scream.
But in this case, it's almost like using any other word or that has an intonation. I don't know. I'm reserving my...
Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, my hypothesis from this is that it's because our vocal cords are pretty narrow in their capabilities. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, as we're moving on, we're just being like the fish. Just like fish, because fish are moving out of the equator. This is not good news. Researchers have just published their study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences entitled Global Warming is Causing a More Pronounced Dip in Marine Species Richness Around the Equator. 5 years ago, they published a study in which they predicted that based on past animal movements from apparent from fossil records from previous periods of warming on our planet that were then followed by mass extinctions, that our extreme period of warming and ocean temperature rise would have this kind of effect. And now they have experimental evidence looking at distribution data on 48,661 species from the poles to the equator, and showing that, yes, indeed, they are responding to equatorial warming by moving to waters that are more habitable to the temperatures that they prefer. So there's a dip around the equator, and species are moving, and this potentially, we don't know what it's going to do, but really, when you start species movement, food sources move and ecosystems are put out of whack. And if the warming happens too fast, then fish find themselves in places, or marine life find themselves in places where they are unable to exist. And so, not good news. I don't think we can put up any fences and stop the fishes from making their swims out of the equator. But
yeah, I think I'm not surprised to hear this, because we know terrestrial animals are moving towards the poles, but they're moving slow because, like there's things in their way on land. And I think the borders of their biomes and their kind of ecology is very specific to topography and all these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But in the ocean, it's so much easier to move. And the edges to these different biomes are a little fuzzier. And I think that, this is a nice foreshadow, or terrible foreshadow, of what we're going to see on land.
Foreshadowing, but for people out there who are concerned about sustainable fisheries and how fisheries will be maintained, this is going to be a huge part of that, is knowing where the fish are going and how they're integrating and interacting with other marine life and how they're able to survive. All right, Justin, time for some psilocybin?
Oh, that's a great idea. This could be the shortest story of the week. Psilocybin, active compound magic mushrooms, may be at least as effective as a leading antidepressant medication in a therapeutic setting. Findings, let's see. finding is a study carried out by researchers at the Center for Psychedelic Research at Imperial College London. It is the most rigorous trial to date. And according to Dr. Carhart Harris, it strongly encouraged both researchers and the public to delve deeply into our results. 6-week course of a leading antidepressant compared to just 2 sessions of psilocybin therapy.
Take away the psychoactive part, the psychedelic part, and
Why?
you've got a powerful antidepressant right there.
One of those two, those are both drugs that we're looking at,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that one's a drug and one isn't, although one is a fungi that was,
Produces a compound that can be used as a drug. Yes.
yeah. I don't know. That's just sort of, that's not really news if you have ever heard of psilocybin or ever read about it.
But-
This has sort of been known for a long time.
But the news is that it is at least as effective as one of the leading antidepressants on the market. So this is really big news from that perspective. It's another tool in the tool belt potentially, and we've been talking about this kind of stuff on the show for a long time. The potential for some of these substances to help people. And so it's great that the research is pushing forward and actually has been allowed to get to this point, which is fantastic.
They have some PR work to do.
Sure.
It's definitely a way to explain that you're making a drug out of a natural element instead of a lab created element. And otherwise we're not trying to give you psychedelic mushrooms. It's not the same.
Right. Yeah. But from there, I guess the question is, can they get into psilocybin and remove the psychedelic part of it to be able to make it tolerable for a wider range of people who would be interested? But just to know that it works, 2 doses in a therapist setting, in a controlled setting, that's amazing. That's really promising.
And as Shubru brings up in the chat room, this is where microdosing could be helpful. If they can find a way to provide it at a low enough threshold that you kind of build it up in your system and there's efficacy, but you don't have the hallucinogenic kind of side effect, I guess you could call it. That's what they would call it if it was a lab created drug, right? They would call it a side effect. Weird dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So
side effect.
Okay, but just to be clear, the antidepressant side effects are sexual dysfunction, anxiety, dry mouth, and I guess that's drowsiness.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not saying you're wrong.
I mean,
I'm just saying there's some PR work because people are going to be, there's going to be an aversion originally to taking mushrooms as a
totally
therapy.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yep.
I think that's where it loses, and we should just give up on it because I don't think it's going to win that fight. I don't think psilocybin can because you can't patent it because it's natural.
But if they're
nature.
able to isolate a compound or make a synthetic psilocybin, something that has been isolated or there's a methodology to isolate it or they can create it synthetically in the lab, suddenly you can patent it. And
suddenly
it is
they can charge
pharmaceutical.
For it.
Yeah.
But if you can grow it in your closet.
How about pushing some light? Pushing the light fantastic. Researchers this past week at Utrecht University and TU Vienna have created very special light waves that can pass through objects or opaque conglomerations of objects. Yeah, so it's really a fascinating concept. There's a particular class of light that these researchers worked with. It's called scattering invariant light. And this means that it scatters in a very predictable way. And because of that predictability, they're able to warp the light or create a light wave that can pass through, diffusing and bouncing off of little tiny particles on its way through and emerge on the other side of an object almost exactly the same as it started passing through, just maybe a little bit dimmer because some of the light will be lost in those reflections and diffractions. It's an amazing new possibility for being able to see into things. So right now we use X-rays to be able to see into the human body. We're able to use various kinds of light, infrared light, to try and get deeper past the skin to get into the body. But perhaps with this kind of scattering invariant light, researchers could program light to go certain depths into tissues, interact with certain biological entities, and then continue along its way and interact with other entities further on. Maybe there are imaging processes that could take place for cellular imaging that have not been enabled so far because of the destructive aspect of the reflection of light as opposed to the light just passing through. Maybe there's also security or technologies that could be involved in scanning and observation. So you want to show what's happening on one side of a wall versus the other side of a wall. You want a light to pass through a wall. Maybe this is something that
we're
into
beyond
that.
the point of night vision goggles. Now we're going to have see-through wall
X-ray goggles.
vision,
yes.
goggles.
But
They're
not
really
X-rays. Yes.
But they're not X-ray. But the X-ray goggles that you bought in the back of the comic books also didn't involve X-ray.
That's true. Yeah, so they tested their arrangement using zinc oxide because zinc oxide is fairly opaque, that has many layers of randomly scattered molecules that were perfect for trying to shine their light through. They were able to get it to shine through their disordered medium and display a picture. So they in one of their trials, they used a picture of a galaxy or a constellation and tried to shine a picture of a constellation through this zinc oxide obstacle, and were able to display it on a field on the far end.
I feel like they picked that because it's just a bunch of dots. And they're like,
yeah.
See, it looks great. But if they picked something that was a little more continuous, they would have had trouble.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, if they tried to show a movie or something, it maybe would not have had the resolution to be able, the fidelity to show up. But the fact that it is showing up at all is amazing. It's a first step in being able to understand the interaction of light waves and the waveforms themselves with nanoscale, atomic scale, with the atomic scale that is contained inside objects, obstacles, and it's very. And I'm excited by this. See-through walls, the invincible light ray. Blair, you had one more story.
Yeah, just a real quick one about speed bumps and how it's saving monkeys.
What?
Yeah, it's from Wildlife Conservation Society. And this is specifically looking at the Zanzibar archipelago at the red colobus, Piliocolobus kirki, almost kiki, not quite. And they looked at the installation of 4 speed bumps along a stretch of road that these colobus were crossing all the time. And they found, based on historic data, that 1 monkey was killed on average every 2 to 3 weeks by traffic. That's a lot. But after speed bumps were installed, it was reduced to 1 every 6 weeks. So just slowing down traffic reduced mortality of monkeys on the road. And I know here in the United States, or we think about roadkill and we think about raccoons and stuff like that, skunks. But if you live in Zanzibar, roadkill could be monkeys, endangered monkeys. So this is just a really good kind of pinpoint study looking at this one area in Zanzibar where speed bumps have been extremely helpful. And so as tourism grows and habitat shrinks, which will continue to happen in wild areas, using science to figure out the easiest and simplest solutions to problems can save species. And so if installing speed bumps saves species in areas that have a high kind of concentration of endangered species, you can just install a bunch of speed bumps and that will reduce fatalities on the road. That is a huge plus.
It's amazing that it's just slow down, everybody. You're driving too fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Slow down, you move too fast. We got to make the monkeys last.
Oh, yeah. You're right. You did it better.
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah, anyway. Speed bump. Slow down. Slow down for monkeys.
Slow for monkeys. Such a simple solution. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just scientific investigation to collect some data. And yeah, you're right. You are right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. We would love it if you're loving the show to help us grow. Please tell a friend about TWIS today. Time for the COVID update.
I knew it was coming this week. I knew it.
You knew it. It would happen eventually. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about COVID and what it's doing right now, just for a moment. So we are fresh out of the winter. We are getting vaccines. We had a big third wave and everybody's like, woo, the third wave's settling down. We've been so good.
Let's make it 4.
Yeah, let's go for 4. Cases are on the rise globally, everyone. And it looks as though we are well on our way to a 4th wave. That is globally, and some locales may be doing very well, but there are no fences, no walls that hold this virus in, so it is global. If it's growing somewhere, it'll eventually come and get wherever it's not. But questions now. What is going on? This virus has killed almost 3 million people worldwide now. What do we know and what do we not know? So right now, there are over 17 million vaccine doses being administered every day. According to reports from 172 countries around the world, there are 191 actually reporting data for COVID cases. The rate of increase in vaccination worldwide is 18% per week. So rising. It's rising tide. Vaccinations are coming. In the United States, 29% of adults are fully vaccinated. 47% are at least partially vaccinated. 47% are at least partially vaccinated. 62% of people 65 and older fully covered. This is really great news. It's especially exciting as all U.S. adults are going to be able to get in line to get vaccinated as of April 19th. That's next week. Mm-hmm. That is next week in the United States. Doesn't mean that you will be able to get a vaccine that very day, but at least you'll be able to sign up or at least start waiting your turn to get vaccinated. We have 3 vaccines in the United States. Different countries have different vaccines. The Pfizer, the Moderna have been doing fantastically worldwide. AstraZeneca had a little hiccup with some blood clots, and another adenovirus vaccine, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, has also been put on hold here in the United States after 6 people, all women, were diagnosed with blood clots. And they're not just any ordinary blood clots. These are a specific blood clot that is in the veins that draw, the portal veins that draw blood from the brain. And in these people, they all, or majority of them, had low platelet counts. This is very indicative of a rare condition. and possibly an immune reaction in which antibodies are created in response to the vaccine that attack the platelets themselves and lead to this clotting. So there's some really big questions going on to really check this out. There was a press briefing today. Doctors were talking about some of the information. They had antibody tests of 5 out of 6 of these blood clot patients did show platelet factor antibodies, which means that their bodies became reactive to their platelets and would have caused those clots. Whether or not that was specifically caused by the vaccine has yet to be shown, but this is the possible path to this severe outcome that is also being seen with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And the commonality between the both of these are the fact that they're adenoviruses. And so now there's or they use an adenovirus vector to get the RNA for the spike protein into your body. And so now there's a big push to try and find out, is this something that happens in other adenovirus vaccines? There is an adenovirus-based Ebola vaccine. There are questions as to whether or not this is a common reaction to adenovirus infections just normally. So there are a bunch of questions. The pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine does not mean it's a bad vaccine. It is an abundance of caution, which is warranted to save lives, even though this is at this point a 1 in a million chance of having this outcome. You're more likely to have a blood clot from birth control pills if you're a woman than you are to have a blood clot based on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at this point. But now doctors know what symptoms to look out for, so more data can be collected. We can really get to the bottom of what's happening. And maybe similar to the Pfizer vaccine, in which we now have the 15-minute waiting period to find out whether or not there is an adverse allergic reaction because some of the ingredients in the vaccine. We now have protocol in place to help people stay safer. And perhaps there are protocols in place that can be used with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well. Maybe it means that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is best for older individuals, because all of these cases were between the ages of 18 and 45 and only in women.
Yeah. So it would mean that you would only you Johnson & Johnson, you would stop giving it to women of reproductive ages.
Yeah,
I guess.
Of reproductive age, basically.
I will also say though, it's 6 women, and so in terms of a sample size,
so small.
I am not convinced that actually means anything because it's only 6 people. I feel like you need a bigger number of, I don't want more people to get blood clots, but
we don't.
But I feel like you need a bigger number to know if there really is a causative link to certain factors, right? And I will say, as someone who got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I am not concerned. It has been 6 weeks since I got it. I am fine. You're more likely to be struck by lightning multiple times than for this to affect you.
No, I don't think that. Is that right? You have better than a 1 in a million chance of getting struck by lightning multiple times?
Yes.
Really?
That is my understanding. I will double check
that's
before the after show, but that is my belief.
I
do believe that is correct.
You're more likely to get in a car accident on your way to getting your vaccine than you are.
Yes.
Risk analysis is very important here.
And I will say the other thing that's important here is for people who might be concerned about this and that it might raise hesitancy, because I know that is an issue.
Yes.
This is proof that the system works.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. That is exactly this is an abundance of caution to keep people safe.
Right. So it's so rare, did not come up in trials. So it was deployed. when you deploy beyond a trial, you get a way bigger sample size. Talk about sample size, right?
6.8 million people.
Yeah. So now you get more information. And from that, now they can pause, not because they think people are going to die en masse from taking the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but because they want to examine this particular side effect, figure out what causes it, so that then they can stop those individuals from taking the vaccine and suggest a different type to those people. This is not saying Johnson & Johnson is going to get pulled, because it's still extremely effective and still extremely valuable, but they might just offer it to specific groups and not to specific groups.
Well,
just like if you're allergic to
or
eggs,
they know what
to
to look
shot,
for,
right?
and they know how to treat it.
Yeah,
so that it's something
absolutely.
that can be taken care of.
Yeah.
All right. So that has been.
Can I also just really quick tell you how likely you are to be struck by lightning, because it's pertinent?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so depending how you count it, it's between 1 in 500,000 and 1 in a million in a year, but it is 1 in 10,000 in a lifetime.
Really? That's high. Much higher than I had thought. Wow.
1 in 10,000, 1 in
Okay.
15,000. It's around that in your lifetime.
Okay, because there's some island somewhere where people golf. It's like the national. It's like the national sport, and for them, they get electrocuted 3-4 times around. Yeah,
This does
like
say
a
men are
normal-
much more likely than women to be
and they're
struck by lightning.
bringing up the numbers.
Golfing.
Take that. Anyway, point being, you are more likely to be struck by lightning multiple times in your lifetime than to get a blood clot from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That's the point. Moving on.
Yep, it appears to be a very rare immune reaction. And so this is something that thankfully they're looking into, and I'm glad that they are and not just pushing forward. In addition, Pfizer has completed a clinical trial of kids aged 12 to 18. It was 100% effective at reducing severe disease. And so they have applied for an emergency use authorization with the FDA. And by May, depending on the outcome of that review process, kids as young as the age of 12 may be able to be vaccinated with Pfizer.
And that would be great, because some of the newer variants are running amok in young adults.
Yes, they are. One of the questions, though, that has come up is, and you've brought it up on a previous episodes, Blair, is why are young adults getting infected more often all of a sudden? And there are many aspects to it. There is the higher transmission of the B117 variant, which is becoming more dominant. And because that variant is like 40 to 70% more infectious than the other variants that we've dealt with before, people are getting more virus when they get infected. That can lead to a higher viral load. And because of the higher viral load, that can lead to more severe disease. We have seen that more severe disease is linked to higher viral loads. So that whole process could be part of older individuals are now vaccinated. The vaccines so far work very well against the B117 variant. And so we're not hearing about older individuals getting ill as often anymore. But now we have younger individuals who are also tired of being at home, and local restrictions are lifted and bars are open and you can go out to drink. You can go out and meet with your friends because the government says it's okay now. And so people go out and they do things, but that doesn't mean that they're safe. And so then they get sick, they get a higher viral load, and they may get more sick than they once did as a result of that. So a lot of different factors weighing in here.
Yeah. As someone who's worked with teens for a long time, I can tell you they're real bad at social distancing.
Yeah.
They don't want to wear a mask. If they don't want to wear a mask, they're going to take it right off. But also they are so sick of being inside, and we're sending them back to school, and all of those things together, it could be more than just the variant. It could be the fact
the kids are back together again.
It's a perfect storm of social factors.
Yes. A lot of what happens with this virus is completely social factors. The waves that come and go, it is more how people are acting that brings those waves forward and back, as opposed to people getting vaccinated. Like that's that these waves are really, really here because of things that we choose to do. And on that note, my last story for the COVID update tonight has to do with wearing your mask. There is a new study out in the Public Library of Science, PLOS One journal, mask adherence and rate of COVID-19 across the United States. They found, looking at COVID-19 case rates across the country for all 50 states and the District of Columbia, between April to September and also May to October. And individuals reported adherence to wearing masks. So a lot of skeptics online, you might hear them say masks don't work. Places that have regulations don't necessarily have lower COVID numbers. It's because regulations don't necessarily equate to people wearing masks, because people choose to do this behavior aspect. They choose to adhere to those regulations or those social standards or not. The bottom line is, in all of these places, the more people adhered to wearing masks, the lower the COVID-19 rates in those areas. So as we are continuing in this pandemic, people are getting vaccinated. It's springtime in the Northern Hemisphere. Stay outside when you socialize. Wear a mask if you can. If you're vaccinated, that's fantastic. But continue to keep others safe and wear a mask until we are very certain that you do not have the possibility of transmitting COVID-19. Safe to hang out with other vaccinated people, though. So, outdoor party, anyone? Let's keep everybody safe, everyone. Vaccination, wearing masks. This is how we become free again. Vaccines for freedom. That's what I get it. Freedom. I want my freedom. I'm going to get a vaccine and wear a mask so that we can be free from this pandemic. There we go. Do I have something to say right now? We're done with the COVID update. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on This Week in Science. So glad that you are here with us once again. Thank you for listening to TWIS. And if you are able, please head over to twis.org and click on our Patreon buttons. That's right. Please support us on Patreon. Allow us to continue bringing science and sanity and conversation and fun, hopefully a bit of fun, to your ears or to your eyes on a weekly basis. It's your support that allows us to keep doing what we do. Click on that Patreon button, $10 and up, and we will thank you by name at the end of the show. I want to hear that list of names grow, grow, grow. We really can't do this show without you. Thank you for your support. And we come back now to a land full of blood and, well, no screams, thank goodness. We already took care of those. It's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
Blair?
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's animals.
Stop, Blair! No,
Stop
don't make
it.
me yawn.
Stop it with
We have a lot more show to do.
Nope.
Yum. Yum.
Ugh.
Yum.
Darn it.
Yum.
I was
They're-
trying not to.
Oh, they're contagious. Let's see how many times I can get our listeners to yawn during this study by saying the word yawn. This is University of Pisa looking at lions and hyenas and contagious yawning. They were looking at these animals living in the wild in Africa. And as we know and we have discussed on this show, prior research has shown many animals yawn. And as with humans, I only yawn real time I yawn. As with humans, it results in increased blood flow to the head. It oxygenates and cools the brain. And so, in short, it's believed that yawns make us more alert. So it's trying to get us to wake up. Yawn contagion, which we've spent a lot of time talking about on this show, it has to do with seeing someone else yawn or hearing the word yawn or talking about yawning. Oh my gosh. I feel the urge to yawn.
Yawn.
We
They do it
can't even
themselves.
do this without yawning.
In this new effort, though, they wanted to figure out if yawning had some other purpose. So when we've talked about it before, we talked about it in terms of a social signal and it having a direct relationship to the actual relationship between individuals. So you're much more likely to yawn in response to someone else yawning who you have some sort of attachment to than to a stranger. And so there's some sort of social aspect to the contagion of yawning. So when they were looking at lions, first they started looking at hyenas, but then it turns out hyenas and lions kind of hang out near each other in South Africa. This is in the greater Makalali Private Game Reserve in South Africa. And the lions, they found, had a lot of yawn contagion going on.
Stop saying that word.
Really hard. But they also noticed that there was something else happening with yawn contagion. When they copied the yawn behavior that someone else did, they then copied other behaviors that happened afterward. So over a 4-month period, researchers recorded many, many, many hours of 19 lions in their natural environment. And they paid specific attention to yawning in the videos. And what they found was that lions mimicked behaviors that followed a yawn as well as a yawn. So if one lion yawned and then another yawned in response, if the first lion stood up and walked a little bit, the second lion who had just yawned in response would also get up and walk a similar distance. So there is a mimicking behavior happening back and forth. So this is, again, totally just observational. There's no for sure links as to if this happens in other groups of lions, why they're doing it. But the suggestion from researchers is that it might be a way of boosting group vigilance. They're saying like, kind of, be alert, wake up, look around a little bit. So it's part of boosting collective awareness. It could help them spot food. If they're not lions, it could help them notice threats. So there is something there, they think, to it's kind of a signal that it's more than just I yawn, you yawn. It's like I yawn, you yawn, and then you pay attention to what I do afterwards.
Right.
So it's I'm rousing myself, which is a social signal that I'm about to do something.
I'm rousing. You should rouse also. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I like this
Get up.
kind of the
Time to go.
next level because it does connect to the conversation that we had before about social connections. It would make sense. This would be the next step, right? The reason that you only have yawn contagion amongst people that have social connection is because you would only care what someone you're socially connected to would be doing.
Right.
Generally speaking.
And if
I
it's
know
a lion in your own
pride,
pride, that lion might be taking a look at what those hyenas are doing.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah.
Yeah, and
checking it out.
Conversely, if it's a lion from a different pride, they're not going to share food with you anyway.
Right.
So maybe it doesn't matter that they're getting up to go look for some food.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting look at yawning in lions.
As a social signal.
One more, I'm going to clear the
deck.
Okay, now from yawning to blood.
Blood.
I have an amazing story about bird blood.
I'm alert.
You're alert.
You've
oxygenated your brain. You're ready to go.
I'm ready.
So this is from researchers at Lund University in Sweden. And they made kind of a wild discovery. I don't know. Maybe you also let me know if this is like not that new or earth shattering, but I thought this was an awesome study. So this was looking at bird blood in winter versus autumn. And something very specifically that allows a bird's blood to be a little radiator in their body.
Aw.
Yes. So until now, the common perception was that birds keep warm in winter by shivering. And then that's when you see them like fluff up their feathers, big and fluffy, and they shiver their large pectoral muscles, and that kind of energizes things, gets energy moving in their body, heats them up, just like we shiver
Right.
when we're cold, right?
Yeah.
But, it could be all about the blood. The blood may indeed be a central heating system inside birds.
That's fascinating.
Yes. They examined great tits, coal tits, and blue tits. They looked at them in autumn and in winter. They took blood samples. They isolated red blood cells, and they used a cell respirometer, which measures oxygen, how much oxygen mitochondria consumes. And they found, first of all, their blood cells have mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Mammal blood cells do not have mitochondria.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So first of all, they have a little engine inside all of their little red blood cells. And then secondly, they were able to look at how much oxygen was consumed by those mitochondria in the different seasons and how that energy was spent. Obviously, the assumption would be that the energy in the mitochondria is spent to shiver to make heat. But instead, it looks like the oxygen consumption spiked in the winter and was spent on producing energy directly to create heat.
Right. No need to shiver, just have a heater. You have a cell that creates energy and can release heat as a byproduct.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, blood samples in the winter had more mitochondria. So it looks like they have a higher metabolism in winter also. So this is wild to me. This is a crazy, wild, insane study to me that awesome. Mitochondria in red blood cells in birds. Also just creating their own heat. I love it.
So, question, is this something that reptiles possibly do?
Great question. Or at the very least, dinosaurs.
Yeah. Did dinosaurs have this? Yes.
Yeah, great question.
How far back does it go?
I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? I'm here with answers.
We got to look at some dinosaur blood. Oh, man.
Oh, darn it. Yeah. So their next step is to investigate whether cold weather is the whole explanation or if there's some other signaling going on in winter. Is it hormonal? Is it circadian rhythm connected? What is causing them to change the amount of mitochondria and the way that they are producing energy in the winter? So they also want to look at what food they eat, if that has something to do with it. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would wonder, every animals naturally change their food sources depending on the season and what foods are available, but is there an influence of those food sources on their ability to produce heat? So that's an interesting question. Many birds, so this is also fascinating because a lot of birds will, especially in really cold climates, they will store food to survive on for the winter when food isn't available. And so they have to rely on this food that they have, put in their little storage lockers for a season.
Yeah.
So it's dried food, it's seeds, it's insects that have desiccated.
Yeah,
very, very interesting. But a lot of birds will fatten up. They fatten. A lot of birds, you'll see them making lots of trips to those bird feeders in the fall because they know winter is coming.
Yeah, they need to feed that mighty mitochondria in their blood.
Yeah, they do. Oh, fascinating. Fascinating. Thanks, Blair.
Uh-huh.
I could use a heater in my blood.
I too could use this.
Nice. I know these are other interesting. This bringing this up is also very interesting because of other aspects of bird physiology, such like heat pumps, being able to keep heat in the extremities, and how blood is pumped through their legs and their feet. Oh, lots of interesting stuff there physiologically. But we're done with the animal corner, so let's move on to a little more This Week in Science. You're watching This Week in Science, and oh hey, if you haven't been to our website yet, go to twist.org, click on the Zazzle link, and you can find our merchandise. Maybe buy a hat or something. Spring's coming. You gotta keep the sun out of your eyes. Get a twist hat. Might be nice. Hey, Justin. Do you have some stories?
Yeah. What do you want? Let me see. How did we do it in the rundown?
Science.
What did we do in the rundown? Which one did we do first? We did that. Oh, yeah, okay. Halfway to zero. This is why 2020 doesn't count.
Okay, let us know.
So according to this here, 17 states plus 2 one-day states, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, have adopted laws and executive orders, and governments have done things to achieve 100% carbon-free electricity in the next couple of decades, 2050-ish. 46 U.S. utilities have pledged to go carbon-free no later than 2050. Put all this together, and you've got about half of the U.S. population economy is basically planning to go carbon-free. Here's what's sort of here's the problem I have with this, though. This is a study that was done from 2005 to 2020. This is Berkeley Lab scientist Ryan Wazer. Business as usual projections saw annual carbon dioxide emissions rising from 2,400 to 3,000 million metric tons from 2005 to 2020. But actual 2020 emissions fell to only 1,450 million metric tons. And the U.S. cut power sector emissions by 52% below projected levels. We are now halfway to zero. Now, I like that people are making laws and trying to do things, but to use 2020 as the year you compare anything to seems like a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a bad idea.
Yeah,
don't know.
We definitely it was definitely like not quite a normal year. Not quite.
Yeah, it's not just that there's not good data. It's just it's outlier data. It's an accounting error. It is that one time when somebody didn't calibrate the machine ahead of doing the experiment. You can't use it. You can't use 2020 data. You just are not allowed. If they had just given us 2019 and made statements based off of 2019, it would have been fine. It might not have been as interesting. Might not have had as big of it was like, turns out, everything is as it was projected in 2005, and we've done nothing. That might have been the story. Nope. It might not have been. The only thing is, I don't know, because you use 2020, and the one thing I know about 2020 is that it didn't count.
Yeah, nobody went anywhere.
But it's promising. I know that we're going to be increasing our renewables. So I saw a study that said we're going to be speeding up, rolling out more renewables, which is exciting. It's not, there are other things that we haven't done right. 2020, not a good comparative year, but maybe we're getting better.
Well, the other thing I think about too is that a lot of workplaces are going to move towards a hybrid model now with teleworking options, and I think that using it for this is kind of garbage, but using it as proof that adjusting certain expectations from a work environment could have a huge impact on greenhouse gas emissions. I think that is an important conversation, right? So that is something to look at here is if you offer people 1 or 2 days a week telecommute, that's going to have a pretty huge impact on some of our emissions. So I think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting that it's still dipped so far, despite the fact that people were using, in some cases, a lot more electricity than in the past 24/7.
Well, so that's also a funny thing is, if you compare it to 2005, we're probably using less electricity because all of our appliances have become more efficient. All of our, it feels like there's a lot more technology in the house, but your old refrigerator, your old light bulbs, and that old little television VCR combo machine that you had, those 3 used more electricity than is being used on your block now. The amount of efficiency that has taken place is really where a lot of that is, and a lot of that was mandated.
Yeah,
a lot of that was.
But that means it's working.
So they're, the final year that they looked at was 2020, but they did look at it compared to the projected, 25 over the last 15 years, right? And so the trend is decreasing compared to the projected energy use. This is the positive take.
No,
maybe it didn't decrease as much, but it was still on the way to 50% less, right?
The Berkeley Labs did a great study, and it's showing that we are actually going to a more carbon-free environment. But you can't make your statement about 2020 is my problem. You could have studied 2020, but you got to stop and say, but if I say that, nobody's going to understand what I'm talking about. Nobody's going to understand what I'm talking about because 2020 didn't exist.
Yeah.
What you have to do is talk about something else. So there's also, it's giant increases in solar electricity, lower costs of wind power. All of these things are playing in factors, and we're actually moving pretty relatively close to the goal of being of reducing that carbon emissions down to 0 in the next couple hundred years. But we are getting there. We'll get there in less than a couple. We
can do it. We can do it, everyone. Come on, work together. Just like we're working together. Never mind. I'll be quiet.
But here's just a fun economic thing to throw into it. There's this is how much the American consumer has saved. Let's see. This is total savings over 15 years, I guess. For example, total electric bills for consumers were 18% lower in 2020 than what had been predicted in 2005.
2005.
Yeah. If we had kept going at that rate of increase that we had been trending, we say we had 18% lower bills, which amounted to $86 billion a year in savings. Sounds like not chump change.
We're going to take those savings and roll them right back into PG&E and California's fire costs. But no.
Oh, that's harsh. Or PG&E.
Let's move away from energy. What else you got?
Okay, this is about a story about imprinting. You know what I'm talking about? Imprinting. That's when a baby duck is born, and first thing that it sees moving, it thinks is its mother.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mama quack. Mama quack. Migrating fish do this. I guess it's the smells that are in the waters where they are neonates. This is what they are looking for when they're heading back to their breeding grounds as adults. How they find their rivers. So it says exposure to environmental input during a critical period early in life is important to forming sensory maps, neural circuits in the brain. In mammals, early exposure to environmental inputs is known to affect perception and social behavior later in life. Visual imprinting has been studied quite a bit. But what about smell? How does smell work? What about olfactory imprinting? So to find out more, scientists from Japan worked on understanding the mechanism of olfactory imprinting during a critical period in mice. Studies published in eLife. This is quoting Dr. Nishizumi, University of Fukui. We discovered 3 molecules involved in this process. Semaphorin 7A, a signaling molecule produced in olfactory sensory neurons. Plexin C1, a receptor for the SEMA7A expressed in the dendrites of mitral tuft cells. And oxytocin, a brain peptide known as love hormone. During the critical period, which is when a newborn mouse pup is a week after being born, critical period, the signaling molecule SEMA7A initiates the imprinting response to the odor by interacting with the receptor plexin C1. What it means is this receptor, what's interesting is this receptor is only there localized in those dendrites in the first week after birth. So there's this very narrow time window when it's going to be sort of activated or interacted with. So that's the window. Hormone oxytocin released in the nursed infants imposes the positive quality of the odor memory. So, of course, once you think you've got this connection, what do you do if you're a scientist? Kind of mess with it. So they had baby mouse exposed to an innately averse odor. Something that would not like. Right. This imprinted odor now induced a positive response against what should be the innate natural response towards the odor. So now you have this hardwired innate circuit and this imprinted memory circuit fighting with each other about whether this is good smell or bad smell. Interestingly, too, here, male mice normally show strong curiosity towards unfamiliar mouse scents of both genders. This was something from a previous study. And they found that blocking SEMA7A signaling during that critical first week resulted in the mice not responding in their usual manner. They displayed avoidance response to the stranger mice as opposed to curiosity. So, yeah, and then interestingly, like, oh gosh, what could we do if we could find this region, this time, this reaction, something like this in humans? What could we imprint young people to like, I guess? But it's also interesting. Is this possible in humans? Does this exist in humans in the same way? Is there this period of time in the same way? Can we make them like healthy food? Can we imprint them with the broccoli smell if we want kids to eat their broccoli? Or how does any of that work? Secondly, though, this is... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, imprinting is not something that we've really looked into in humans or that we've seen in humans. We can do all sorts of experiments on ducks, geese, mice, these animals, but I'm going to have to look up whether it's something that happens in humans. There are obviously preferences that are developed from a very, very, very young age, but whether or not they have to do with an imprinting process is not something I have ever heard of.
So here's an interesting second thing that they're asking about or talking about. The study also suggests that improper sensory inputs may cause neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism spectrum disorders and attachment disorders. Oxytocin is widely used for treating ASD symptoms in adults. However, Dr. Nishizumi says, our study indicates that oxytocin treatment in early neonates is more effective than after the critical period in improving the impairment of social behavior. Thus, oxytocin treatment of infants will be helpful in preventing ASD and AD, which may open new therapeutic procedure or for neurodevelopmental disorders. The problem there is, how do you treat a developmental issue at the time of development, when you don't know that there's going to develop a problem, like the signs of autism, these things, they show up much later, don't they?
Yeah, they show up much later. Yeah.
So, but I guess he's trying to say that.
But if it is
maybe.
something that's genetic, if it's known, if you have a genetic predisposition in the family for autism,
don't give your babies oxytocin. But
I mean, do hug your baby.
Oh yeah,
right.
That'll give them oxytocin.
I mean, the brain produces oxytocin, so interesting.
It seems like a reach. I don't know enough about this, but it seems like this last statement of connecting this to autism disorder, spectrum disorder kind of stuff, seems like a reach to me. Maybe it's an inefficiency of one of these three mechanisms that he's discovered that's not allowing the oxytocin to do this imprinting at this point. And he's thinking, hey, maybe that's where all of this generates from. At that point,
and if you can give exogenous oxytocin, add oxytocin somehow, then that might boost more normal development.
Right. Or the one of those other the molecules that's doing that's part of that chain. It might not even be the oxytocin itself. The oxytocin might be available. But I guess, So anyway.
This sounds more like...
I don't know how you test it in babies. That's why we do research on mice.
Yep.
This sounds more like
pigs.
something that you would use for okay, we've tested this fetus and it has a high likelihood of having these genetic markers that lead to autism. Here are things that we can do to promote kind of traditional neuronal development as this baby develops, right? I feel like that's more what this is going towards.
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking into how the sensory system is involved in creating patterns of behavior and neuronal development that will affect an animal for the rest of their lives that happen very early in development. And so if you can influence those, I mean, maybe it's olfaction, maybe it's vision, maybe it's sound, maybe it's touch, but perhaps, the addition of oxytocin could therapeutically be used to enhance neuronal development and sensory responses for individuals from a young age.
And it is something
still very. This is just hypothetical at this point.
Oh, it is. But but the thing that has got me kind of stuck on it is that it's a little bit arrogant of humans to think that such a few weeks or whatever it is in our early development can't possibly affect the outcomes of the rest of our lives.
Right, but they do.
But most other animals, as soon as they get to the planet, they are getting ready for one type of survival or another, and it's going to absolutely get them primed for what the world is going to be.
Yep.
As we see in these mice, whether or not you smell other mice, it can make you not be interested in other mice later, kind of a thing. So humans are going to be that way too. It's something that we're not immune to being animals at this point.
No, we are not. We haven't vaccinated that out of ourselves for sure. Continuing along this kind of interesting connections in the brain vein, I have a story about your face, man.
My face?
Your face. Your face.
What's wrong with my face?
Your face. Yep. Your face. It's just like your brain. No, it's not just like your brain. But researchers at Stanford University and KU Leuven in Belgium have identified 76 genes that are linked in brain formation and facial formation. They took a look at a 472 regions in the genome that affect brain shape and compared them to genes involved in facial shape, found 76 that were previously shown to influence facial structure out of those 472. And we're able to start saying that the face and the brain are intertwined. And we've seen this in rare disease conditions. Holoprosencephaly, the brain doesn't divide properly into two hemispheres, and there are also facial malformations that go along with the disease. But these researchers wanted to know, in the healthy condition, how are the face and the brain linked, and what genes could be responsible for those structural changes and developments. And they started looking at the genes, realizing, according to one of the researchers, Joanna Wisoka, who was involved in this study, that there's a lot of crosstalk occurring between the face and the brain during development, and it's got to be more complex than they realized. Surprisingly, some of these genes are only known to be expressed in the face and don't have any known role or expression in the brain. This implies that in addition to the brain influencing the facial shape, the face influences the brain structure. But this is not facial phrenology. Facial structure, you can't look at somebody's face and tell whether or not their brain works well. You can't tell how
You
well
look like a smart fella.
that brain works underneath the hood. That is not what's going on. Cognitive aspects of brain functioning are not involved in this. These are just larger scale structural elements, whorls and wrinkles, bulges. They found that genetic signals influencing brain shape are enriched in genomic regions regulating gene expression during embryogenesis in facial progenitor cells. And also, none of the shared genes are known to be associated with any cognitive, behavioral, and neuropsychiatric conditions like Alzheimer's disease. So this has been a link that they've known for a long time, but this is the first time that anybody's taken a look to see what genes might really be responsible and explain the relationship between the face and the brain. But yes, your face it influenced your brain shape, and your brain shape influenced your face shape. You've got a face brain, man. Face brain.
You've got a face for science.
That's right. That's very good. And then finally, a discovery that is really changing science textbooks, because this is something that we thought, and it's now different, apparently, because of new research. And we need to change textbooks. Okay. In the human brain, with our eyes looking out of our face, our eyes are bilaterally connected to the two hemispheres of the brain. That means each of your eyes has a nerve that goes to the hemisphere that's on the same side of the brain as that eye, and it has a nerve that crosses over to the other side of the brain. So it's got two nerves that are connecting, one to each hemisphere, and each eye does that. So you got one's going straight back and then ones that cross over. We've known that humans have done this for a long time. It has been a thought that this bilateral structure of the eyes leading to the brain is something that occurred with land mammals, and that it doesn't happen in fish. And we look at species like zebrafish, which are in the lab and we're looking at all the time. They are only unilaterally set up. They only cross over. The right eye is connected to the left hemisphere, left eye connected to the right hemisphere. No same hemisphere connectivity. They only have that crossover. And so we've been looking at many fishes over the years, and fossil fish. Fossil fishes don't really show up, but they've been looking at this for years, and we're like, no, okay, so fish, they've got it set up this way. Land animals, we have these bilateral connections. So this was part of 3D vision that was necessary when we came on land. This is part of how land mammals, land animals see in 3D.
But
Yep, this is where the butt comes in. This is where researchers from France who were interested in checking out, who were interested in looking into this question, they had to get connected with researchers in the United States where we have, and also in Australia, where we have old fishes, where we have fishes that are fairly conserved, that have evolved relatively slowly, so they still have traits that they would have had hundreds of thousands of years ago, millions of years ago even. And so they wanted to look at gars. Gars are fish with alligator-like, needle-like snouts. They've got little teeth. They're very interesting, very old fishes. And the gar, they proceeded with their team of researchers to look at the gar brain and compare it to the brains of zebrafishes and many other species. And they found that, lo and behold, they had bilateral symmetry in the connections in the brain. The images of using brain imaging, different colors on either side, either hemisphere of the optic lobe and the brain, they were able to visually see using different colors that there were connections going from one side to the other and also staying on the same side. So this is the first evidence that very old fish did have this bilateral symmetry, and this is something that we really have gotten wrong, and that this bilateral symmetry is not necessarily the thing that made land mammal vision so amazing in 3D, that it was something that was necessary much earlier. The textbooks will be changed as a result of this. And the researchers are really proud of the fact that their research, they're like, I'm teaching from a textbook that teaches this wrong, incorrectly. My work is going to fix this textbook.
That's very
great.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just very neat. Comparisons, when you're able to take a look at things, it's just so neat that we have these ideas about things that we've had for a long time because we've looked at stuff a particular way, and someone takes a new look and you go, oh, nope, we got that wrong. Time to rewrite the textbooks.
Well, there's so many different ways that things could have gotten to where they are now. There's convergent evolution. Yes. There's a common ancestor, and then actually things lost certain traits. There's the fact that traits exist where we don't see them originally. They're kind of masked. There's all sorts of things. We're taking our best guess here because, for example, eyeballs and the neurons attached to them are soft and squishy and not well preserved in the fossil record. So,
right. Yeah.
There's so much guesswork involved trying to guess how things are connected and when they broke off, and it's amazing what work gets done on that and how much certainty we have. It's awesome and I love it, but there also is a lot of kind of question marks that we just kind of had to fill in the dots, fill in the blanks. And when you're working with the Mad Libs, it doesn't tell you if you need a noun, a verb, or an adjective. You could be pretty far off from what was intended.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The researchers do go on to say that this is probably something that these what they call ipsilateral connections that were lost, the same side of the brain connections that were lost, they were ancestral and that they were lost in these modern teleost fishes.
And that's wild. Like, why? Why would you lose
it? Yeah, why did they not lead it?
I want to see worse.
I mean, is it because...
Hey, hello, evolution. I want to see worse. Thank you.
I mean, is it the position of the eyes on the heads of these animals? Is it the body shape? Is it some aspect of how these fish have structurally changed? What happened? Why? I don't know. You don't know. Textbooks changed. Dun, dun, dun. Fancy times in Fishland. If anybody has any questions about the show, or if you have any questions that you would like us to answer about COVID, or, I don't know, your brother-in-law, I don't know, ask us questions. You can send me an email, Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, and you can send Justin or Blair emails. You can also send us a message on our Facebook channel. Woo! Daily Tech News Show and This Week in Science crossover show coming up this Saturday.
Oh, wow. That's
April.
soon.
Yeah, it's soon. April 17th, 4 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure calendars are marked if you want to watch it live. It will be streaming on all of our channels. It's going to be there. And it's going to be on the DTNS Twitch channel as well. It's going to be.
Yeah. It's going to be on all of the internets.
All of the internets. Wherever you like to watch DTNS or TWIS, it will be there. It should be there. Unless something goes very awry, which I hope it will not.
It's going to be like watching both shows at the same time.
Yeah, but better. Ugh. Have we made it to the end of this show so we can start
so.
getting ready for that show?
We have.
Yeah, we've done it. We've done it. Yay! Thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you did enjoy the show. Thank you, co-hosts, for a great show. Shout outs to Fada for help with social media and show notes, Gord for manning the chat room, Identity 4 for recording the show. Rachel, thank you so much for your assistance. And I would like to thank our Patreon sponsors for their amazing support of This Week in Science. Thank you to Carl Kornfeld, Jen Myronek, Melanie Stegman, Da Kramsta, Karen Tazi, Woody MS, Andre Bassett, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Jonathan Stylos, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Scioli, Guillaume, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Gaurav Sharma, Shubru, Dalrin Hannon, Donald Mundus, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredus 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Joshua Fury, Shauna Nina Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leesman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Kevin Railsback, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Mark Massaros, RDM, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Robert Coburn, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Matt Sutter, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Mountain Sloth, Jim Drapeau, Sarah Chavez, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Stanton, Paul Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, Ulysses Adkins, Brian Condren, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, please go to twist.org and click that Patreon button and choose your level of support. Whew. We'll be back on next week's show.
Yeah, we'll be back Saturday, but then we'll be back again next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, 5 a.m. Central European time, broadcasting live from our YouTube, Facebook channels, and from twist.org/live.
Want to listen to us as a podcast? Just search for This Week in Science where podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, you can get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twist.org. And you can also sign up for our newsletter.
That's right. You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin@twistmedia@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put twist, TWIS, subject in your subject line, or you'll get spam filtered all the way to next Tuesday. And I'll be yawning and I won't be able to read it.
Oh my goodness. You can also hit us up on Twitter, where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Kiki, and at Jacksonfly. Oh, and Blair's Menagerie is also one of our Twittering handles. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes due in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought. And I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.